there is in Vienna a holiday, All Souls Day. And that day, all the Viennese go to the different graveyards all over Austria and give something to the dead people who are there. They bring flowers, they make the thing more wonderful. We have no All Souls Day, but we have Halloween, where we reverse it. Yeah. There, the living go to the dead and try to appease the dead. In our culture, the young people come to the doors of different houses and say tricks or treat, and they are frequently disguised as witches, as devils, as skeletons, or whatever it would be. So it would be almost, so to speak, a denial of what the Austrians did. The Austrians said, honor the dead. But we say, we are the living. We ask you old people, give us something. It's a sort of an interesting culture that when you go to the grave to give, rather than that you go to the house to ask for something. And in many ways, this interesting reversal is the part of a culture here in America that goes west. We want to get more and more and more and more. Well, the Austrian culture was constantly reminded of death. I mean, even in the things that one keeps, you know, such as I keep all letters that my grandfather wrote to my father, or all things that my father brought to America, metal containers that he had to use during the First World War when he was in the army. We are, as you can see in this room, people who are concerned with the past, and the Americans in many ways with the future. You know, it is as if the computer is here more important than is an old book that is 400 years old. And this interesting reversal in the cultures, that's why we speak about die neue Welt. We still speak about America as the new world, and we speak about Europe as the old world. Can we build a bridge between the old world and the new world so that it goes back and forth? And in a way that the last years of our lives, you know, the last 50 years that we are in America, we have slowly used it that way. In the beginning, when he and I left, I wonder he would agree with him even if I ask him, we said, finish with Europe. I will have nothing to do with it anymore. I promised myself even I will never talk German again. I didn't keep the promise. I do quite well with German now. And then slowly, something made us long to go back because the roots here are shallow, like the eucalyptus trees. And the original roots we had far back in the old country. What I wanted to do is to stimulate you to make a few remarks about what is perhaps the biggest contribution that you made to psychoanalysis and to psychiatry and to the social sciences, namely the work with these children.
Well, I think what I try to do in my work is to live out what I hoped I learned from Freud and from Anna Freud about human dignity and respect for the human being, even the mentally deranged one. I felt very strongly that every strange behavior must have good reasons in the eyes of the person who behaves in it. Even today, in most places, the concentration is to have people give up their deviant behavior, rather than the concentration is on understanding the deviant behavior, its causes and its purposes, and the purpose it serves to the individual.
I talk more the Freudian way, I've learned that well. But I'm not stuck with Freud, because Freud never allowed us to get stuck. He said that what I do are but little fragments of beginning, and the rest of us must continue. And a Kohut, for example, continued. He called attention to important aspects of narcissism in the same way that an Erikson called attention to important aspects of how to get an identity. And he would call attention to deranged language is meaningful. Always was. And in that sense, I can cope with all the cahoots, so to speak, that exist, with one exception. When the language becomes not an instrument of understanding each other, but a power instrument. You know, in the old days, in the Austrian monarchy, we said the first language is German. The other languages don't count. You know, Serbian, Croatic, Czech, Hungarian.
That was the undoing of the monarchy.
Excuse me? And that was the end of the monarchy. You know, if they would have said that, well, if you want to go to Prague, talk Czech.
Czech's right.
Or whatever.
That's right.
And I think it was the breakdown of the monarchy, and it may very well be the breakdown of psychoanalysis, if all of us want to have a private language. And I would think that if we have learned one thing from Freud, respectively, what we see in our new time now, then we would say, tell me, in which language shall I talk to you? Such as if we had a seminar here, and finally all the colleagues who sit here would start to ask, we would have to modify.
This may be a closing kind of question in some way. With everything that each of you has contributed, thought about over these many years, if your own vision about what you would like to see follow you, some legacy that you've left, some hope or vision that you do have, not necessarily a happy ending, but one that you at least would aspire to have happen, are there things that you would want people to be thinking about or be aware of, or?
Well, I would like, as I make amply clear in my earlier remarks, I would like that people think much more seriously about the destructive tendencies in man. You mentioned the atomic bomb, you know, I mentioned the death drive that Freud mentioned. I think we should think much more seriously about the destructive tendencies in us, what can be done about them, where they come from, how we can master them, so that, to quote Freud, that in the eternal battle between the two eternal forces, Eros and Thanatos, Eros will win out, at least for the time being, although Thanatos in the end always wins out. And if we take that seriously, life will become much more meaningful to us, I believe.
Bruno and I spoke the other day about the events in Eastern Europe. And in spite of all that we know about the history of Europe and the history of the world, none of us could have predicted. There is always a little hope that the walls will come down. But I would like the walls to come down, for example, between different psychoanalytic schools and psychotherapeutic schools. I would like the walls to come down between analysts and behavior therapists. I would like the walls to come down between the people who have only drugs in mind and closed hospital doors, and those of us who believe in a completely different environment. And what will happen then, I believe, that we will slowly educate each other, because each has to learn from the other. And if I ever could determine the budgets, the state budgets of different countries, America or Europe, Russia or China, and I would have real power, permit me to be naive, I would recommend to them to put most of their money in education. And if they do that, you have a different world. So you see, neither he nor I have given up the notion of hope, and we have not given up the notion of changes are possible, in spite of the fact that we have had a rich life of ups and downs. Some were terrible, and some, like now, look, like he and I, each of us is going to write another book. I said to him he must.